I've made 2 films before, but in this film it's been tough. And not because, I mean, it's really personal to talk about, but it's also, it's hard to talk about as well because people, when you hear schizophrenia, people think violence straight away. I've had people who won't leave me alone with their kids because they're scared, and that's heartbreaking. So people just think you're a killer or something. Like, unfortunately, we mentally ill just sort of get lumbered with like, oh, we need to lock them away because they're violent. Where very few sufferers are. I mean, someone with mental illness is much more likely to be the victim of violence rather than the giver. And people also think schizophrenia is split personality or something, but it's not. You need to break it down. Like, schizophrenia is sort of, you get thought block, which means you can't think properly. Your thoughts are all jumbled. You get hallucinations, visual and audio. Your phobias are exacerbated and they get bigger. You get really bad paranoia. But organising this film, like, it's been really hard. Just organising it, like, I can't concentrate like I did before when I made the other ones. It's much harder to sit and concentrate and be like, this is how I want to do it. Like, I've been overthinking it for so long and making it complicated, where really all I want to do is tell people this is what it's like. So one of the most common hallucinations is you hear voices. And my ones, I have sort of more, but I sort of have an ongoing, like, whispers, lots of whispers. But I also, the main 2 are, I have Humphrey Bogart, and I have Norman Bates from Psycho. Bogart is much more, I mean, most people get quite negative voices. When they talk to me directly, which isn't as, it's quite rare they talk to me directly, but usually they speak in third person. So they'll talk about and be like, oh, Juno's drinking his tea, or Juno's walking, and then sometimes they'll both be like, watch out for that guy behind you, or someone's following you, be careful, or they'll warn me about things. But then sometimes they can be negative and be like, you're an idiot for doing what you're doing, and like, you're sick, and no one wants to be around you and all this sort of stuff. So I find it very difficult to be around people when they're like this. And it happens a lot that sometimes it just gets too loud and I can't do anything. I have to go sit on my own and just have to wait it out. And they're constant. They're not, I can still go out and do other things, but they haven't gone away just because I'm not mentioning them or anything. I'm not being like, oh, I can hear this, I can hear this. They're always there. And when you're sort of walking down the street or something, it's difficult to sort of pay attention to, like, crossing the road or being aware of what's around you. So I have to be much more careful when it comes to crossing roads and all that sort of stuff. I find it very difficult to be out in public and around people. I get really stressed out because I have a big phobia that I have this paranoia that people are going to come steal my blood and they're going to put needles in my arms and steal my blood. And that people have little radios, these little tiny radios, and I can hear them all whispering, and they're all talking to each other about me. And I mean, like, a doctor's told me, like, the doctor says it's not real and stuff, but I'm like 90% sure people have these radios and they talk about me.
she's been coming here quite a lot lately. I come out here at sort of 10 o'clock and feed her. Nice. I think she thinks it's safe in the garden.
So, a lot of the time I come out here and there's Scarecrow Man. He'll stand in the corner, or he'll be hiding in the shed. He's like 8 foot tall. He wears a big burlap sack on his head. And usually he doesn't say anything, but sometimes he'll kind of like a screeching noise. And usually I see him around everywhere, pretty much. Sometimes he's in your room and like at the bottom of the bed, shouting crowds. It's pretty hard to sit and do anything when he's there. So when I was diagnosed paranoid schizophrenic when I was 16. It was during my GCSEs, and I was sectioned at a hospital for a little while. I won't say what the hospital's called, but this place was a pretty small hospital. It was only about 20 beds, and they had it was me and another guy there who had the same thing. The rest were sort of eating disorders, but people have this image of a psychiatric hospital being like One Flew Over the Cuckoo's Nest or something, and it's not far off. Not in sort of the places are all white and clean and like sterile, but they're very. Once you're in a place and you know you can't leave, it's really hard to accept it. I mean, you're stuck in. You're not allowed. When you first move to a place, you get put on suicide watch. So you're checked every 5 minutes. None of your rooms have door handles on the inside. All your mirrors are plastic. There's no drawer pins. There's none of that. Nothing to stick posters up or anything like that. They search your room every sort of 2-3 days to check if you've hidden like razor blades or anything around the room. Anything you can hurt yourself with. But I think the worst thing in a place like that is the isolation. It's just, you're surrounded by doctors and nurses, but you're completely on your own. It's tough as hell. And before I went, I was terrified of like electric shock therapy and stuff. And I mean, they still do it, but the images I had, like the flashes and like Bogart and Bates all talking about they're gonna shove you down and force you to take this. It's just horrendous. I always have fears of needles and such as well. It's just horrendous. But even when you're there talking to the people, you don't feel. Especially when I was there, I didn't feel like. I mean, there's only me and this other guy, and he didn't seem any different to me. But it was very strange. A doctor coming and telling you like, you're different. You're not the same as us. So you're being forced to stay here. I guess they say it's for your own good, but it's especially when you're 16 and stuff, and you're forced away from home, you have to stay in this hospital. It's really tough. I mean, that's the only way I can describe it. It's just tough to know that you just can't leave, and like all your freedom's been taken, and you're forced to take your pills. You have to take this. You do this. You have to do this. It literally becomes. It just becomes about getting to the next day. So you take your pills at 5, dinner at 7, and like it's just the routine. Getting the routine right is just getting everyone day to day. No one wants any bumps or any confusion or anything. It becomes very strange. I hope I never go back to a place like that, and not because I mean, it's not, the doctors aren't mean, they're not abusive, they're not anything like that at all, but unless you've been in a place where it's just, I can't even describe it. The thought of being in a hospital is not very nice to me still. This is a diary I kept when I was in hospital. It's not very big, and there's lots of, I'm not sure why, there's lots of pages half ripped out. But I kept this while I was there, and to be honest, it's a bit, it's kind of painful to read, to be honest. Like, even now, I haven't looked at it in a few years. I can't believe I was there. Wait, still is. A treatment called EST. Brutal torture, bound down, leather cuffs, a hand tight wall, having mouth guarded was shoved in your mouth, covered in Vaseline, and then high voltage charged through your brain. It seems like torture. Paula says they rarely do it anymore, but it normally used with people who discover progression. Like, even the words are really mixed up. It's pretty, some of it doesn't even make any sense. Like, I can't text properly or anything, and sometimes simple things like figuring out how much change I have in my pocket I can't do. I have to ask someone to help me with it. Like, it's really like little crippling things like that really cripple you, and you can't figure out just even like simple, like even what time it is. Like, it gets really difficult to do stuff like that, because when you have a chorus of voices in your head, it's really hard to try and respond to other people and not just to yourself. Stranger things sometimes about schizophrenia is you have, I try and use a doctor talk. Sometimes you'll think you're other people, and sometimes I get these very strong, where sometimes I can't tell if I'm me or I'm Norman Bates, and it's really hard. Sometimes I'll slip into where I'll start thinking like Norman Bates, and not in a violent way, like, because I never saw Norman Bates as a violent person. It's just Norman himself is very trapped. I always kind of related to Norman Bates in that way, and I think maybe it's sort of the way I kind of relate to Norman is very close. And then when with the hallucination as well, it's kind of different. It's kind of, it's not different, it sort of feels the same. They feel linked in a way, but when I try and explain it, it just sounds very strange. Like, but I have these vivid daydreams where I sort of feel like I'm at the Bates Motel and I'm walking around the house and stuff. It's really strange. I don't know how to describe it, but it feels sort of 80% real and 20% dreamlike. It's strange. But I get Beatles a lot. I always see Beatles. I mean, there's some on the table now. But you have to grit your teeth and just be like, it's not real. I have to calm myself down. Like, I've got really sweaty hands now thinking about it. I just have to sometimes I see them in my food and I can't eat my food. I see them crawling up walls and I have to swat them away. And it gets embarrassing, and when I'm out in public and I have to swat away these beetles and scarecrows. And yeah, it's... So when I was in hospital, I had this book. It's called The Madman's Tale. This copy's really worn out. This is the same copy I had in hospital. It never really leaves my bedroom shelf. Like, it's always next to my bed. It's written by a man named Katzenbach, and it's about a young schizophrenic who's committed to a large hospital in the 70s, and I mean, it's kind of a gruesome book. It's about murders in a psychiatric hospital, and the lead character, Francis Petrel, he helps solve these murders despite having what he has. I always felt when I had this book, it was the only book I had. You know, I didn't have any films, I didn't have anything else. This is the book I had the whole time I was there, and I started feeling really close to. I felt like Francis was my friend, so I'd be really comforted reading stuff he said. After a while, like the characters of like Francis and Pete the fireman and Lucy Jones, they felt like friends, and I sort of started to wish I was like Francis kind of made me feel like you can still do great things when you have this illness.
I think sometimes the fox is sort of misunderstood, like I guess kind of like mental illness is they get a bad rap and stuff for going through people's rubbish and stuff, but really they just look for somewhere safe and something to feed their young. So I kind of like to sit and help them best I can.
There's a line in Madman's Tale where I think sums up schizophrenia pretty well. It's a line that Francis says when he's sort of looking back at what it was like when he was younger. And he says, "I could never tell which I hated more, the elusive world I came from and could never join, or the lonely world I was required to live in, population 1, except for my voices."